Morning, all. All right, so it's been some time since I have spotlighted a truly awful season. And today we're going to talk about the Quebec Nordiques. Today we're going to talk about the 1990-91 Quebec Nordiques. Now, what's interesting is I've already done a video on the 89-90 Quebec Nordiques. The 89-90 Quebec Nordiques, I think, had 12 wins. Well, this season they had 16. They finished 16, 50, and 14. So 46 points, which is not great, was 15 better than the 31 they had the year before. Their coach, Dave Chambers, I don't know what would have been expected of him, but, I mean, this was not a very good team. 236 goals scored. That was 20th in the league. Remember, there were 21 teams, and they were last in goals against at 354. So this was a Quebec team that was going through some things, and we knew going into the 90-91 season the plan was to draft Eric Lindros. So since we knew Quebec was going to be the worst team in the league, there really wasn't any debate over who the worst team was going to be. It was not a surprise they struggled against every division. So what's interesting is the record against the Adams, which was their division, they were actually a little better. 9-14-9. So if they'd been able to win at that rate against other teams, they would have had a lot more points. But against the Norris, they were 2-11-2. Against the Smythe division, 2-10-3. And against the Patrick division, 3-15. So just overall, it was a rough season for the Quebec Nordiques. And it's not like there was a time during the season where it looked like maybe they'd pull themselves out of this mess. October, they were 3-7-3. November, they were 1-11-2. So that's 4-18-5 by the end of November. Not going to the playoffs. December, 5-7-2. That's their best month. January, 2-8-2. February, 1-9-2. And in March, they were 4-8-3. So they actually finished up the season a little better than they'd been the rest of the year. And it was really a disaster. But again, comparatively speaking, I remember as a Quebec fan thinking, well, they're still better than they were last year, which is not a ringing endorsement for how this team was. Of course, the interesting thing is that your leader at this point is Joe Sakic. 80 games played, 48 goals, 61 assists, 109 points. And this is where that conversation was had. Now, Sakic's on these teams in Quebec, they're really bad. Is this going to cause, Sakic to be a guy who accepts losing? Yes, that was a conversation. And whether or not when Quebec starts getting better, would they need to trade Sakic and find somebody that would be, better suited to helping them with their winning culture once they start winning? Again, it sounds odd to say, but I remember that being a conversation. Now, Matt Sundin had his rookie year that year, 80 games, 23 goals, 36 assists, or 36 assists, for 59 points. So Sundin was there. That's a pretty good 1-2 down the middle. But again, they're young, and the team around them not very good, which is really exemplified by Tony Herkus, good depth forward, probably shouldn't be third on your scoring list. 70 games, 16 goals, 32 assists, 48 points. Stéphane Morin only played 48 games that year, 13 goals, 27 assists, 40 points. I remember looking at that thinking, man, if Morin played all year, maybe they would have had more wins. Yeah, it was delusional, wasn't it? Tony McKegney played 50 games with Quebec before being traded to Chicago, where he would round out his career. With Quebec, 17 goals, 16 assists, 33 points. He only played in 9 games for Chicago after the trade and just put up 1 assist. So McKegney's career ended with kind of a whimper there. Mike Huff, 63 games, 13 goals, 20 assists, 33 points. Brian Fogarty, there's a blast from the past, isn't it? 45 games, 9 goals, 22 assists, 31 points. And so that was a conversation piece as well of, well, Fogarty was out for about half the year. Morin missed almost half the year. So maybe if they'd had those guys healthy again, maybe they could have got to 18, 19, or 20 wins, right? Guy Lafleur, his final season in the NHL. And it was tough to watch. It was tough to watch this team go out there and lose this often with Guy Lafleur skating around. 59 games, 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points. So for Lafleur, this was really and truly that finish to his career. And it wasn't one that we would want to write home about. Then there's Owen Nolan. His rookie year was that year as well. 59 games, 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points. And again, Nolan would go on to have a very good career. And the season following this one, Nolan blew up. But I remember during that season, the conversation was, Sundin, there were people who liked Sundin, but there were people who said, well, he's Swedish. The offense is going to be great, but the physical side isn't there. Who's going to do the hitting for Quebec? And Owen Nolan was seen as a disaster out of the gate. Well, the guy's clearly, he's a flop. He's a bust because he had 3 goals in his rookie season. And again, the following year, it took off. It clicked with him. I remember being very surprised that Owen Nolan just turned that switch on the following year. Ron Tugnutt was the starting goaltender, and honestly, he was a trooper throughout this. Never complained, never wanted out. 56 games, a record of 12, 29, and 10, an 885 save percentage. But he had 5 wins in 35 games the season before. So, as much as 12 wins in 56 games looks ugly, because it is, 5 wins in 35 games the year before was pretty ugly. It basically doomed Tugnutt to always have a mediocre win-loss record in his career because he was a backstop for really, really bad teams in Quebec. Jacques Cloutier, 31 games, 13 games, sorry. That should be 13, not 31. Let me go ahead and turn that around. I'll even use purple just so it's a bit of a different color. But yeah, 13 games, 3-8-2 record, 884 save percentage. John Tanner played 6 games, 1-3-1 record, 880 save percentage. Stéphane Fiset makes his debut that year. 3 games, 0-2-1 record, 902 save percentage. And of course, Fiset would go on to become their starter at a later date. And Scott Gordon, 13 games, an 0-8 record, 787 save percentage. So I've got a Scott Gordon rookie card. Fingers crossed on that one. But anyways, and I do, because ProSet had all of the goaltenders for Quebec, and I remember at the time thinking, I'm going to keep these cards because I don't think these guys are going to play again. And it's one of those oddities where people will keep hockey cards because, they're going to be worth a lot of money. For me, it's like, this guy's obscure. I got to keep this card because people are going to have to hear about this guy someday. And so Gordon's one of those guys that, again, with a 787 save percentage, if you're asking yourself, how did he play 13 games? Well, injuries play into it, and Quebec was a bad team, so not really a big deal. They allowed 6 or more goals 22 times by my count. So I went through the entire 80-game schedule. By my count, 22 times they allowed 6 or more goals. Not 5, 6. So that's an average of 2 per period that they were allowing 22 times. This was a team in Quebec that was still drawing fans. This is a team that fans came out. The 31-point season, they came out and watched them. The 46-point season, they came out and watched them. The amount of loyalty from Quebec fans was fantastic. From October 21st to November 19th, they lost 14 in a row. So that's right in this part here. And yeah, that just absolutely annihilated any hopes that they might be significantly better than the year before. Again, that 46 points is 15 more than the year before, but 46 points is not a lot, right? So they were held to 1 goal or less 19 times. So this is something to keep in mind. 1 in 4 games, they score 1 or less goals. More than 1 in 4 games, they allow 6 or more. So this team was a complete and total utter disaster. And it was an utter disaster that wasn't intentional the year before, but it did feel like this season was, it's a shame. Now we're going to get Lindros. So when we talk about the draft lottery and why the draft lottery exists, it's seasons like this that have caused the draft lottery to come into existence. Because it was clear they wanted Lindros. Lindros didn't want to go there. He was very outspoken that he would not sign with Quebec. June 22nd, the Nordiques, their brain trust, they go up and they drafted Lindros. Now, I'm not mad at Quebec for drafting Lindros because they did the right thing. Even though they knew he wouldn't sign, they did the right thing. They acquired an asset with a ton of value who they would then flip a year later and make themselves a heck of a lot better in return. The trade with Philadelphia was fantastic for the Nordiques. But this was a painful period. And while we didn't know why Lindros was not reporting to Quebec and wouldn't sign there, to those of us from the outside, we looked and went, this team has won 28 games over the last 2 seasons. I wouldn't want to play there either. And that was a concern was, would Quebec be able to attract players? Because, yeah, this was an absolutely disastrously run team. And it had good players. Like I said, you got Sakic, Hall of Famer. Sundin, Hall of Famer. Lafleur was a Hall of Famer at the time he was playing for Quebec. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame and then came out of retirement after. Nolan's not a Hall of Famer, but you could make an argument for Owen Nolan. Based on some of the ones that have gone in lately, I think the argument for Owen Nolan kind of gets stronger. And then, again, in net, I thought Tugnutt was a good goaltender. You got Fiset coming up. This was a team that wasn't bad in net, and Tugnutt would prove that when he went to other teams. It was just this team was so abysmal defensively, couldn't score offensively, and they had injury problems on top of it. They were a bad team before the injuries. The injuries made it worse. And yet, again, we can look and say, well, at least they weren't as bad as the year before. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, so 15 points. So next year they'll have 61. Following year they'll have, so by about 5 years from now, they should be pretty good at this rate. And of course, 5 years after that, the Colorado Avalanche would win the Stanley Cup. And of course, this logo here is the reverse retro logo that was used by the Avalanche a couple years ago during that first round of reverse retro jerseys when they did the really nice take on the Quebec Nordiques jersey. So it was quite the season. Of course, I've talked about the Eric Lindros trade and everything that happened there, and how he was traded twice. But that would be a year after this. And they went through another rough year, although nowhere near as rough as this one. 91-92 was a better year for Quebec. I think they did improve by 15 points the following season as well. 61 points sounds about right. But anyways, that's another season for another time. This season was kind of a disaster from start to finish, but an interesting one at that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.